Hey guys, before I get started on this shorter episode, just wanted to let you know that I'll be going live on YouTube after Game 5 of the NBA Finals tomorrow. I'll obviously do a little bit of reaction to what's going to be a huge, potentially championship-defining game, but also do a little bit of a Warriors off-season Q&A. So jump in the chat with me, have your thoughts on trade, free agency, everything like that in regard to Golden State or around the league in general, and you can ask me some questions as well. But for now, let's get into it. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. We are back. The off-season is officially here. It's just gone 8 o'clock, or is about to go 8 a.m. Monday morning, my time here in Australia, and I wake up to the huge blockbuster deal of Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic, completely out of the blue. No word that Desmond Bane was discontent or available in Memphis whatsoever. And they've just pulled the trigger on a significant deal here that sends Bane to the Orlando Magic for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Karl Anthony, 4 first-round picks, and 1 first-round pick swap. So my initial thoughts on just the trade in general for both teams. I'm going to pivot a little bit now. Is it a big price to pay for the Magic? Yes. Like when you look at what happened at the mid-season deadline, you look at Luka Doncic going to the Mavericks going to the Lakers, and the Mavericks only getting 1 first-round pick. If you look at the Warriors' own trade for Jimmy Butler, I think if you're a Golden State fan, I think we're pretty happy with the deal we got with Jimmy, given now what Memphis have got for Bane. Obviously, very contrasting situations. Desmond Bane's nearly 10 years younger. Obviously, a very different situation where Jimmy was making things uncomfortable in Miami, didn't get the extension, was agitated as a result, wanted to be traded out of the joint. So very contrasting situation, contrasting ages. But I think some would argue Jimmy Butler is still a better player than Desmond Bane, particularly come playoff time in the biggest moments. And yet Bane gets, 4 first-round picks and 1 first-round pick swap, and the Heat get the 20th overall pick in this draft, and that's it. Now, you can argue Andrew Wiggins is a better player and on a far more palatable contract than what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is, but at the same time, you could argue that I'd prefer Cole Anthony over Kyle Anderson as well. So I just think, obviously, those two things don't marry up. So the price is very steep from the Magic. Do not get me wrong. However, I actually kind of like it. And I'm going to pivot. I think some people would say, wow, this is a huge overpay for a guy that's not even an all-star. Desmond Bane is that. I think he can be an all-star. I think he certainly can, particularly in the East, which we know is far weaker than the West. So I would expect in the next 3 to 4 years for Desmond Bane to be an all-star at some point, if not a multi-time all-star. This is a guy that averaged over 19 points per game this season, 5.2 rebounds, 6.1 assists, sharp shooter, shot 39.2% from 3 this season, which is actually below his career 40. I think he's 41% on his career. So he's a very, very good player. And he's also the exact type of guy the Magic need, because he provides that shooting and off-ball spacing when you've got Paolo, when you've got Franz. And he also, at the same time, provides a little bit more juice, a little bit more shot creation and playmaking for you as well, which we know the Magic's offense has really, really struggled over this season and even going back to last season, obviously. So I actually like it from a Magic perspective. I think a lot of people would think, oh, well, they need a point guard. I'm not really. Like, I think when you've got Paolo and you've got Franz, like, the ball is just going to be in those guys' hands the majority of the time. And I think a lot of people could look at that and say, well, that's a bit of a problem, because we saw how stagnant their offense became at times, particularly, in the postseason, where a lot of this stuff is just Paolo dribbling the ball and, getting a pull-up mid-range at the end of it or whatever else, and it can get a little bit predictable. But I think ultimately, like, you're going to put the ball in their hands. They're going to get better in terms of playmaking. They're just going to get better overall as such young players. So I actually like it for the Magic, getting a guy in there who can play off the ball but can actually also play on the ball a little bit as well. And I think the need for a point guard now, having got rid of Cole Anthony, they certainly need a backup point guard as such. But now you've got Bane and Suggs in your backcourt, who are guys that can play as catch and shoot threats off Franz and Paolo, but can also handle the ball a little bit as well. So that's a pretty dangerous foursome now. Suggs, Bane, Franz, Paolo. That's a pretty good combination. And in the Eastern Conference, you'd expect the Magic to be in legitimate contention for a while, for the next decade, you'd hope here from their perspective. So, yes, you've given up 4 first-round picks and 1 first-round pick swap, but if you look at them, it's a number 16 pick in this year's draft. Okay, cool. It's a Suns 2026 pick, which we'll see what happens with Phoenix, but they're not looking to necessarily rebuild because they don't own their own first-round picks. So, from that perspective, it's like, well, it's only next year. It's not like it's 5-6 years down the track. Yes, they'll move KD. Would it shock me if the Suns actually, bounce back and finish a little bit higher than they did this season? I'd be surprised, but again, I'm not saying that this is going to be, there's still a chance this isn't a top 10 pick kind of thing. So I don't think that's probably the juiciest one, though, from a Memphis perspective, because then you look at the Magic's picks unprotected in 2028 and 2030. Well, again, something would have to go terribly wrong, I think, for the Magic to be a lottery team in those years. Like terribly, terribly wrong. And I just don't see that happening. Like I cannot foresee the Magic dropping to a point and with that young core intact, how they could possibly become a lottery team in those years. I know that's a long way away. We've got 3 years and 5 years till those points, but this team is now set up for what should be the next decade, or at least the next 5-6 years, while Paolo and Franz are kind of going to be under contract and stuff like that. So we obviously know Paolo is going to sign that max extension. They've got Franz under contract, Suggs under contract, Bane. Like they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Therefore, I just don't see, like, when you look at these deals and you look at the picks coming up, can you foreshadow that like one of these picks is going to be top 5 or anything like that? Maybe the Phoenix pick next year, but even then, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. And I'd imagine that the 3 picks that Orlando are giving up of their own this year's number 16, obviously, and then the 2 in 2028 and 2030, like they're all going to be outside the lottery. One of them already is, and the other 2 very, very likely to be outside the lottery. So yes, it's a steep price to pay on paper, but I think the Magic are incredibly well set up here to preserve themselves from giving up anything of substantial value in this deal. And then, others have talked about how after such a bad first year in Orlando, KCP's contract is essentially a negative one. So maybe actually throwing in a first round pick to get off his deal. I just think, again, steep price to pay on paper, but I think a good deal for the Magic. Now, from a Warrior perspective, the first thing that we look at here, beyond just looking at the deal for both teams, is how the Bane trade potentially impacts further moves at Memphis, and particularly Jaren Jackson Jr., who we know is going to be coming into the final year of his contract next season. He's going to be extension eligible. Does this change things? Does this make Jaren Jackson Jr. more gettable, available, or does it actually mean that, hey, part of the reason they're getting rid of Bane and his big contract is in order to pay Jackson? Now, there is a chance that might be the case, but there is a little bit of upheaval here. There is a little bit of uncertainty that could give Golden State a window to go and explore a potential trade for Jaren Jackson Jr., which I've talked about previously, and I think I just put it in the box of, well, that's unrealistic. That won't happen. Let's not talk about it too much. But I think after this trade is worth talking about to a significant degree, and is worth noting. I'll quote this piece from NBA insider Mark Stein in the wake of the Desmond Bane trade. Stein writes, is Memphis still as committed to its star guard, that being Ja Morant, and Jaren Jackson Jr. as it once seemed? Do the Grizzlies suddenly have interest in a rebuild or a retooling? These are questions bouncing around 29 other front offices as we speak, even though a renegotiation and extension of Jackson's contract has long been viewed as the Grizzlies' top off-season priority. So again, the end there would suggest that, hey, there's a higher likelihood that Jackson renegotiates and extends his contract and is not on the table in Memphis. But again, the uncertainty to me would suggest that, hey, if the Warriors can get in the conversation, then that could be a decent scenario. Now, it would be, just as what we've seen with Bane, it would be a huge price that you would have to pay. But maybe for a 25-year-old who fits your needs for more shooting, more size in the front court, while also improving your defense. Like, that's the thing. Like, how many guys are the Warriors going to be able to target this offseason who really, really help you offensively, who can be a third complementary guy to Steph and Jimmy, who is 6'10", 6'11", who can space the floor while also being a floor spacer, a shot blocker on defense, and he's a former depoy just 2 years ago. Like, this is kind of a dream perfect trade target for the Warriors, even if you want to look at it and say, well, he's not really a center. History would suggest you need to play another big next to him. He wants to play a power forward. He doesn't rebound enough. Perhaps his best defensive ability is as a help defender coming over and blocking shots rather than a guy who's really anchoring the paint. I don't know. I get the concerns there, but I actually just think Jaren Jackson Jr. would be perfect for the Warriors. Again, a guy that's averaged over 20 points a game, 37.5% three-point shooter this season. I think he gets a little bit jump shot happy sometimes, but he also, when he is aggressive, he does have this ability to get to the rim and finish with either hand. So, man, I just think it would be a perfect deal for the Warriors. Now, in terms of what it would take, the other good thing about Jackson is that at the moment, his current contract is only $23.4 million. Now, that's going to jump significantly, and you're going to have to pay him significantly more than that moving forward. But right now, that contract allows you to potentially get in the market without having to give up Jimmy Butler or Draymond Green. Like some of these other guys we're talking about, whether it's, exploring a reunion with KD, which doesn't sound like that's going to happen, but obviously that would take Jimmy Butler. Larry Markin, and that would take Jimmy Butler. Kristaps Porzingis, it's kind of hard to get to him at just over $30 million. If you're looking at a sign and trade for Miles Turner, who wants $30 million per year, like a lot of these guys, it's very, very difficult to get to unless you're basically relinquishing one of Draymond or Jimmy. Jaren Jackson Jr. still remains at that price where you could get in the conversation while keeping Draymond and Jimmy, which is obviously what you would want to do in this scenario. So is this a potential Kuminga sign and trade? I don't think so. I don't think Memphis are necessarily going to want to completely tear it down. But if they're looking at this and saying, well, we just got 4 first-round picks and a first-round pick swap from the Magic for Bane, can we try and retool here a little bit where we still get some decent players in, but again, we retool a little bit, get ourselves some significant assets. Maybe at some other point we can pull off a blockbuster trade for a legitimate superstar, because I think that's the issue for Memphis right now is that Bane, Morant, Jackson, that's a great trio, but Morant has been somewhat inconsistent, health-wise, off-court-wise, has just been a little bit too unstable. And as a result, they haven't reached the heights that we thought they would, when they made the second round of the playoffs, right, against the Warriors back in 2022. They haven't reached the heights that we thought they would go on to achieve since then. And so do they need to pivot off Ja and actually look for a bona fide, proven, consistent, reliable superstar to build their franchise around? Well, maybe the best way of doing that is either through the draft and getting as many first-round picks in as you can, or getting so many first-round picks that you can then get yourself in the conversation for the next superstar that becomes available, whether that's Giannis or something like that. Who knows? But, I've heard Devin Booker's name thrown around in regard to Memphis already. So I don't know. But perhaps in this situation, they could be like, well, yeah, we'll take on Kuminga. We'll actually pay Kuminga. Obviously, from a Warriors standpoint, only 50% of his salary goes out, but you could do Kuminga and Moses Moody. Like, let's say Kuminga got 30 or not even 30. Let's say, just trying to do the math here, Moody's on 11, so that would mean you'd have to get another 12. Let's say Kuminga gets 25 mil a year from Memphis. So that's 12.5 million going out from the Warriors. Moody's on like 11. All of a sudden, 12.5 and 11, that's 23.5. That's getting you to Jaren Jackson Jr., right? Would you do Kuminga, Moody, and multiple first-round picks for Jaren Jackson Jr.? I don't know. I think the Warriors would consider it. Now, would you have to throw... I think if you had to throw pods in there, that's maybe... I know fans will get pissed off with me putting the line at pods after everything we went through last offseason, but maybe I'd probably stop there. I wouldn't want to give up Pods, Moody, JK, and multiple first-round picks. But I think there's room here to operate and at least explore what a Jaren Jackson Jr. deal could look like. And it could come out of nowhere because there was no reporting on this Bane stuff. There was no inclination that this was forthcoming. We know everything regarding KD and the Giannis stuff has kind of quietened down now, but obviously everything's looking around KD at the moment and the teams after him with, Houston and San Antonio, Miami, a few other teams involved there as well. There was absolutely nothing to suggest that Desmond Bane would be on the table or that Desmond Bane would be traded immediately now to the Orlando Magic. So potentially behind the scenes, Mike Dunleavy and the Warriors could capitalize on this, take advantage, and at least explore what a Jaren Jackson Jr. deal may look like. Because again, you're not going to get too many better options who are realistic from a salary matching standpoint and from an on-court perspective can be a fantastic defensive duo with Draymond Green and only add to what is an already elite Golden State defense while generating far greater offense, being that third guy next to Steph and Jimmy. He's 25 years old, so he's also young. Like you're trading for a younger player. It's not like you'd be giving up significant assets for an older player. Now, the Warriors are in a bit of a different situation than the Magic are. I think the Magic, you could if they're having these conversations internally, they can say, yeah, we're happy to trade 4 first-round picks to Memphis for Desmond Bane because we've got Paolo Banchero, because we've got Franz Wagner, because we don't foresee ourselves being bad in the years that we are giving up these picks. If you're the Warriors and you're thinking, well, hang on, yes, we're trading for 25-year-old Jaren Jackson Jr., but we've also got 3 guys over 35. Can we really afford to give up these picks in the late 2020s, early 2030s for Jaren Jackson Jr.? That's going to be a harder conversation to have, but it also might be why you can get a deal done because Memphis look at those picks and think, wow, okay, they're very, very valuable because at that point, Steph Curry's probably going to be retired. Jimmy Butler might be retired. Draymond Green might be retired. So I don't know. It's going to be fascinating, but who knows what can happen because, again, I don't think any of us saw this Desmond Bane thing coming. I'm going to finish it up there, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. As I said at the start, I'll be back tomorrow for a post-game live after Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Looking forward to that one. Obviously, the Thunder leveling things up at 2 apiece. I'm expecting them to go up 3-2 back on their home floor. But again, as a neutral fan, I'm just hoping that we can get a 7-game series. That would be unbelievable. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Hope to see you tomorrow. Come and have your say. Once again, much appreciated for all the support ongoing. Thanks, guys.